The warm glow of the city lights flickered against the polished glass doors of the exclusive Sterling Grand Hotel, a beacon of luxury that catered to the world's elite. Inside, champagne flutes clinked together, the low hum of orchestral music floating through the air, weaving an atmosphere of exclusivity. Outside, beneath the golden awning, a man stood, his hands in his pockets, his posture composed, yet unknowingly on the precipice of an incident that would shake the foundation of this establishment. Darius Collins adjusted the lapel of his tailored navy blue suit, his reflection staring back at him through the glass. He had arrived for an evening he had planned meticulously, a celebration of his recent promotion at one of the city's top financial firms. The night was meant to be one of indulgence, a well-earned moment to savor success. He had made a reservation at the Sterling Grand's rooftop lounge, a venue known not only for its skyline views, but also for its notoriously selective clientele. As he approached the entrance, the doorman, a middle-aged man in a pristine uniform, shifted uncomfortably. His eyes scanned Darius from head to toe, not with admiration, but with a subtle scrutiny that Darius had encountered before in certain spaces, an unspoken questioning of his right to be there. "Sir, may I help you?" The doorman's voice was neutral but firm. Darius smiled, producing his phone. "Yes, I have a reservation under Collins. Rooftop lounge, 8 p.m. The doorman hesitated, his fingers pressing the concealed earpiece he wore. Behind him, a second staff member, dressed in the same crisp attire, approached. There was a silent exchange between them before the second man finally spoke. "I'm sorry, but we can't allow entry at this time," he said, his tone practiced, as if he had rehearsed these words before. Darius's brow furrowed. "Excuse me? I have a confirmed reservation." He turned the phone screen toward them, the email confirmation clear as day. The doorman barely glanced at it. "There's been a mistake. We're at full capacity this evening." Darius's stomach tightened. His eyes drifted past the staff to the opulent interior, where a steady stream of guests, well-dressed, affluent, walked in without question. Couples, businessmen, socialites, all of them moving past the threshold that had suddenly become impassable for him. "That doesn't make sense," Darius said, his voice even but laced with controlled frustration. "I can see people going in right now." The doorman's expression didn't change. "I apologize, sir, but we have the right to refuse service." A sharp silence hung between them. The weight of the words settled in, familiar yet cutting all the same. Darius knew this wasn't about a reservation mix-up. It wasn't about capacity. It was about something far deeper, far uglier. A few passers-by slowed their steps, sensing the tension. A couple at the entrance exchanged uncertain glances. Darius exhaled, the fight-or-flight response pressing against his ribs. He had spent years, decades even, working twice as hard to ensure he would never find himself in this situation, where his worth was questioned, not by his merit, but by his appearance. His jaw clenched as he considered his options. Walk away, demand an explanation, make a scene, and then a voice. "Excuse me, what seems to be the problem here?" Darius turned, as did the doorman. A tall man in a tailored gray suit, his salt and pepper hair perfectly groomed, stepped forward. There was something about his presence, a quiet authority that immediately commanded attention. It was Charles Wren, the CEO of Sterling Grand. Darius hadn't expected the evening to unfold this way. But now, as the weight of the moment pressed down on him, he realized this wasn't just about him anymore. This was about something much larger. For a brief moment, silence settled over the entrance of the Sterling Grand Hotel. The doormen stiffened, their expressions unreadable, as Charles Wren's sharp gaze moved between them and Darius. The CEO of the hotel wasn't just a figurehead. His presence carried weight, his reputation built on years of leadership in the luxury hospitality industry. Darius, still reeling from the blatant rejection he had just faced, took a breath before speaking. "Apparently, my confirmed reservation isn't enough to get me inside," he said, his voice measured but firm. Wren's eyes flicked to the doorman. "Is that so?" His voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of authority. The senior doorman hesitated before answering. "Sir, we have the right to refuse service if we believe it is necessary for the comfort of our guests." Wren's gaze sharpened. "Comfort?" The doorman shifted slightly. "Yes, sir. We were simply following standard policy." Darius scoffed. unable to contain the bitter chuckle that escaped. Standard policy? Interesting. Tell me, exactly what part of your policy says that a paying customer with a confirmed reservation, dressed in the same tailored suits as half the people in there, should be denied entry? A few onlookers stopped in their tracks. A woman in a sequin dress clutched her partner's arm, whispering something in his ear. A businessman, who had just stepped out of a black luxury car, glanced at the scene with curiosity before quickly averting his gaze. The doorman remained silent. Wren inhaled deeply before turning back to Darius. "Mr. Collins, would you be willing to step inside with me? I'd like to discuss this personally." Darius studied him for a moment. He had seen men like Wren before, powerful, wealthy, and often untouched by the kind of experiences that black men like him face daily. But there was something in the CEO's expression that made him pause. Curiosity? Concern? A sense of responsibility? Reluctantly, Darius nodded. "Fine." The glass doors swung open, and for the first time that evening, he stepped inside. The hotel's interior was even more opulent than he had imagined. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the marble floors, and a grand piano played softly in the background. Well-dressed guests mingled, laughing and sipping cocktails, completely unaware of the confrontation that had just taken place outside. Wren led Darius to a quiet lounge area off to the side, where plush leather chairs surrounded a sleek fireplace. He gestured for Darius to sit, then took a seat across from him. "I want to start by apologizing," Wren said. "This is not the kind of experience we want our guests to have." Darius leaned back, crossing his arms. "With all due respect, Mr. Wren, an apology doesn't change what just happened out there. Your staff took one look at me and decided I didn't belong. And let's be honest, it's not the first time something like this has happened in a place like this." Wren nodded slowly. "You're right." That caught Darius off guard. He had expected defensiveness, excuses, anything but immediate acknowledgement. "I've been in this industry for a long time," Wren continued, his voice measured. "And while we like to believe we've moved past certain biases, the truth is we haven't. I'd be lying if I said I was surprised by what just happened." Darius arched a brow. "So, you admit there's a problem?" "I do." Wren exhaled. "The real question is, how do we fix it?" Darius studied him for a moment. Was this genuine, or just damage control? He decided to push. "Let's start with accountability," he said. "Your staff felt comfortable enough to turn me away, which means they didn't think there'd be consequences. What does that say about the culture in your hotel?" Wren didn't flinch. "It says we have work to do, and I take full responsibility for that." Darius narrowed his eyes. "Words are nice, Mr. Wren, but what about actions?" Wren leaned forward, his fingers interlaced. "What would you suggest?" Darius hadn't expected that. He had come prepared to fight back against empty platitudes, not to be asked for solutions. He took a moment before responding. "Start with transparency," he said. "If this happened to me, it's happened to others. How many complaints like this have been ignored or swept under the rug?" Wren nodded. "Go on." "Next, training," Darius continued. "Not just a one-day seminar where people check a box and move on. Real, ongoing education about bias, how it manifests, how it affects customers, and what your staff can do to recognize it." Wren considered this, then said, "And if I told you I wanted to make those changes, but I need your help?" Darius frowned. "My help? I don't just want to fix this for the Sterling Grand," Wren said. "I want to set a new standard for the industry. You clearly understand this issue in a way that I never could. Would you be willing to work with me on this?" Darius hesitated. He had come here for a night of celebration, never expecting to be put in the position of an advocate. But maybe, just maybe, this was an opportunity to create real change. The weight of the decision settled over him as he met Wren's gaze. This wasn't just about him anymore. Darius leaned back in his chair, absorbing Wren's proposal. The CEO's request was unexpected, an invitation to not only challenge the system, but to play a role in shaping its future. "You want my help?" Darius repeated, skepticism evident in his voice. "Yes," Wren said simply. "You just outlined the very changes that need to happen. You have a perspective that I don't. If I'm going to make this right, not just for you, but for anyone who's been treated unfairly, I need insight from someone who's lived it." Darius tapped his fingers against the armrest. "And what does that look like, exactly?" Wren exhaled, as if carefully weighing his next words. "First, I need to understand the depth of the problem. If this happened to you, it's likely happened before. But how often? And what's been done about it? Darius frowned. Are you telling me you don't already know? Ren shook his head. Not in the way I should. Complaints get filed, reports get written, but if those issues don't reach the top, they get buried. I want to bring them to light. Darius studied him. You want an investigation? Yes, Ren confirmed. I want to dig into our records, interview past guests, and examine our hiring and training practices. If there's a pattern, I want to expose it. Darius crossed his arms. And then what? You investigate, release a PR statement, and hope the bad press blows over? Ren met his gaze, unflinching. No, I want to make permanent changes. I want to rework our policies, retrain our staff, and implement measures to prevent this from happening again. But first, I need to see the full picture. Darius considered his words carefully. He had spent years navigating spaces where he was treated as an outsider, and he wasn't naive enough to believe that one conversation could undo decades of bias. But for the first time, he saw an opportunity, not just for a bandage fix, but for real, systemic change. If we do this, I need full transparency, Darius said. No half measures. No sugarcoating. Agreed. Ren extended a hand. Darius hesitated for only a moment before shaking it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Ren wasted no time launching an internal audit, reviewing past complaints and guest records. Darius, now working as an independent consultant, was given full access to the process. The deeper they dug, the more unsettling the findings became. Out of the 3,200 guest complaints filed over the past 5 years, 147 directly referenced racial discrimination or biased treatment. Some cases mirrored Darius's experience. Black guests being denied entry despite having reservations, being asked for additional proof of identification, or receiving noticeably different service compared to their white counterparts. A handful of complaints described even more blatant discrimination. Staff members making inappropriate comments, Black guests being seated in less desirable sections of the hotel's restaurants, and security being called on guests for suspicious behavior when they were simply waiting in the lobby. Perhaps most damning of all, several complaints had been filed against the very doorman who had denied Darius entry. Each report described similar patterns, Black guests being turned away under vague pretenses. Yet, no disciplinary action had ever been taken. Darius sat in Ren's office, scanning the documents before looking up. This guy has been doing this for years. Ren rubbed his temple, and nobody stopped him. Darius set the file down, because nobody cared enough to. The weight of the words hung between them. Beyond the records, Ren and Darius began reaching out to guests who had filed complaints. Some were hesitant to revisit their experiences, while others were eager to be heard. One man, a lawyer named Terrence Bryant, described an incident eerily similar to Darius's. I had a reservation at the rooftop lounge. Showed up in a designer suit, just like everyone else. The doorman told me they were at capacity. I saw 2 white couples walk in right after me. A woman named Kendra Mitchell recounted a business dinner gone wrong. I was meeting a client, and the waiter ignored me half the night. I had to flag him down for water, while every table around me was getting top-tier service. My client noticed. I was embarrassed, and I shouldn't have been. Each story painted a picture of a culture where discrimination wasn't just an occasional oversight. It was ingrained in the fabric of the establishment. Darius felt a mix of vindication and frustration. The problem was worse than he had imagined. Yet part of him knew this was just the tip of the iceberg. Ren sat back in his chair after their latest round of interviews, his expression grim. This isn't just a training issue. This is systemic. Darius nodded. And now that we know the extent of it, what are you going to do about it? Ren exhaled. We dismantle it. From the ground up. The air in Ren's office was thick with tension. The weight of what they had uncovered wasn't just a stain on the Sterling Grand Hotel. It was a reflection of an industry-wide issue. If they were going to change things, it wouldn't be through surface-level fixes. They needed a complete overhaul. We're not just talking about firing a few employees and calling it a day, Darius said, his voice firm. This is about rewiring how your hotel operates, how your people think. Ren nodded, steepling his fingers. We need a structured plan. A real one. Darius had already been thinking about that. He had spent years advocating for change in corporate spaces, consulting with companies about racial bias, and challenging outdated systems. Now, for the first time, He had a chance to build something from within rather than fighting from the outside. I have ideas, Darius said. But this can't just be a Sterling Grand initiative. If you really want to change things, we need to set an example that the entire hospitality industry can follow. Wren exhaled deeply. Then let's build something that can't be ignored. The first step was addressing the most pressing concerns. The doorman who had denied Darius entry and had multiple complaints against him was terminated immediately. But Wren and Darius both knew that firing one employee wouldn't fix the problem. So, they launched an immediate audit of all staff, particularly those in guest-facing roles. Employees with repeated complaints of discrimination were either put through an intensive retraining process or removed entirely. To ensure transparency, Wren issued a public statement acknowledging past failures and committing to real change. It wasn't the usual corporate fluff. It was blunt, direct, and backed by concrete action. We have failed our guests. The Sterling Grand has not lived up to its promise of excellence for all. That changes now. The statement outlined the steps being taken, including a new independent review board that would handle all guest discrimination complaints. No more internal cover-ups. One of the biggest discoveries during the investigation was the hotel's lack of diversity among staff, particularly in management positions. Out of 60 senior managers, only 4 were people of color. The frontline workers, housekeeping, maintenance, and kitchen staff were far more diverse, but they rarely moved up the ranks. That changed immediately. Darius pushed for mentorship programs and internal promotions that prioritized employees from underrepresented backgrounds. Hiring panels were restructured to ensure decisions weren't being made based on unconscious bias. More importantly, a diversity quota was introduced, not as a token gesture, but as a measured strategy to ensure equitable representation. Wren had been hesitant at first, but after reviewing the hiring data, he agreed. We're not just filling seats, Wren said. We're breaking a cycle. Many companies offered diversity training, but most of it was performative. A one-time seminar that employees sat through and promptly forgot about. Darius refused to let that happen. Instead, he designed an ongoing, immersive program where employees weren't just lectured about bias. They experienced it. One of the most powerful exercises involved role reversal. White employees were placed in simulated scenarios where they faced microaggressions, dismissive service, and outright discrimination. They had to book a reservation under a non-white name and observe the difference in response times. They had to navigate security checkpoints where they were singled out for no reason. The impact was immediate. Employees who had never truly grasped the weight of racial bias suddenly saw it through an unfiltered lens. This isn't about making anyone feel guilty, Darius told them. It's about understanding what it feels like to be treated as less than, so that when you go back to work, you never make someone else feel that way. To reinforce these lessons, every employee, from the cleaning staff to the executive board, was required to take quarterly assessments. Their performance directly impacted promotions and bonuses. If they failed to meet the new ethical standards, they didn't advance. Policies and training could only do so much. Real change had to be embedded in the hotel's culture. Darius worked with Wren to create an internal committee dedicated to equity and inclusion. Employees from all departments, regardless of rank, were invited to join. Their job was to continuously assess workplace culture, report discrimination, and suggest improvements. Additionally, a new guest feedback system was launched, allowing visitors to report bias in real time. Complaints were now handled by an independent oversight board, ensuring accountability at every level. Darius also introduced an incentive system. Employees who demonstrated exceptional inclusivity, whether by helping a guest who felt uncomfortable or speaking up against discrimination, were publicly recognized and rewarded. The message was clear. This wasn't just about avoiding bad behavior. It was about actively fostering a culture of respect and equality. Wren and Darius knew that fixing one hotel wasn't enough. The real goal was to set a precedent for the entire luxury hospitality industry. They started by hosting roundtable discussions with executives from other hotel chains, inviting them to review Sterling Grand's new policies and consider implementing similar changes. At first, there was resistance. Some saw it as unnecessary. Others feared backlash from high-paying guests who didn't want to be lectured about race. But when the Sterling Grand began receiving widespread praise for its changes, along with an increase in bookings from guests who appreciated the new policies. Other hotels took notice. Before long, competitors were reaching out, asking for guidance on implementing their own diversity initiatives. Darius had gone from being denied entry to becoming one of the most influential voices in hospitality reform. And he wasn't stopping there. Through it all, Darius struggled with the weight of his own emotions. He had spent so much of his life fighting for spaces where he was treated with dignity. Now, for the first time, he wasn't just demanding respect. He was helping build an environment where people like him never had to fight in the first place. One evening, as he walked through the Sterling Grand's lobby, he noticed a black couple checking in. The front desk staff greeted them warmly, treating them like VIP guests. It was such a simple moment. But for Darius, it was everything. He realized then that the change they had fought for wasn't just theoretical. It was real. It was happening. And it was only the beginning. Months had passed since the Sterling Grand Hotel had first come under fire for racial discrimination. And now, the air surrounding the establishment felt different. The changes weren't just on paper. They were real, tangible, and deeply felt. The hospitality industry had taken notice. News outlets had run multiple features on how the Sterling Grand had transformed its internal culture, highlighting the effectiveness of its new policies. Other luxury hotels, once skeptical, were quietly reaching out, seeking guidance on how to replicate the Sterling Grand's model. For Darius, the shift was surreal. He was no longer just a guest demanding basic respect. He had become a key voice in shaping how the industry treated people of color. The hotel itself had undergone a transformation, not just in policy, but in atmosphere. Guests of all backgrounds now walked through the grand lobby knowing they would be treated with the same dignity and respect, regardless of their skin color. One evening, as Darius strolled through the hotel, he noticed something that made him pause. A young black couple had just arrived, clearly celebrating a special occasion. As they approached the front desk, the staff greeted them with warmth and professionalism, just as they would any high-profile guest. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, no subtle discomfort. Darius watched as the couple smiled, checked in, and were handed their keys with ease. That simple moment encapsulated everything they had fought for. This was how it should have always been. Darius knew their work wasn't done. While the Sterling Grand was a major victory, the deeper problem extended far beyond a single hotel. It was an industry-wide issue. So, with Ren's support, Darius launched the Fair Hospitality Initiative, a program designed to help hotels across the country implement anti-bias policies, equitable hiring practices, and guest protection systems similar to those at the Sterling Grand. The initiative quickly gained momentum. Major hotel chains that had initially resisted change were now reaching out, eager to be part of the movement. Some saw the financial benefits of diversity. Others had been forced to confront their own discriminatory practices and realized reform was overdue. But for Darius, the real victory wasn't in corporate compliance. It was in the stories of guests who no longer had to fight to be treated with dignity. Emails poured in from Black travelers, recounting experiences of being welcomed at luxury hotels where they once felt like outsiders. A father wrote about checking into a high-end resort with his teenage son, relieved that for the first time, no one questioned whether they belonged there. A businesswoman described walking into a five-star hotel and being greeted as a VIP rather than a suspect. These were small moments, but for people who had spent their lives navigating spaces that weren't built for them, they were everything. One evening, Darius found himself sitting across from Ren in the hotel's private lounge, sipping an aged whiskey. "You did it," Ren said, leaning back in his chair. Darius smirked. "We did it." Ren nodded, taking a thoughtful sip of his drink. "You know, when this all started, I thought this would just be about fixing a PR disaster. But this changed me." Darius raised an eyebrow. "How so?" Ren exhaled, swirling his glass. "I always thought I was a good guy, that I treated everyone fairly. But I never really saw the cracks until you forced me to look." He paused. "I used to think that racism in the hospitality industry was just a few bad apples. But it's not. It's built into the foundation. And if we don't tear it out at the roots, it just keeps going." Darius studied him, seeing the genuine shift in his expression. Ren Sterling had come a long way from the hotel CEO, who had been oblivious to his own company's failings. "You're right," Darius said. "And we're not done yet." As the Fair Hospitality Initiative expanded, The impact became undeniable. Hotels that once turned a blind eye to discrimination were now being held accountable. Guests had the power to report bias in real time. Hiring practices were actively monitored to ensure diversity wasn't just a checkbox, but a priority. More importantly, the industry was learning that treating people with dignity wasn't just an ethical choice. It was a business imperative. The Sterling Grand saw an increase in bookings, particularly from travelers who valued inclusivity. The hotel had once feared backlash, but instead, they had earned the trust of a new wave of customers who appreciated their commitment to change. The message was clear. Equality wasn't a threat to luxury. It was an enhancement. Months later, Darius sat in his apartment, scrolling through an email he had just received. It was from a young black man who had recently checked into the Sterling Grand. He wrote about how, for the first time in his life, he had entered a luxury hotel without bracing himself for judgment. How he had been treated with the same warmth and hospitality as every other guest. The email ended with a simple but powerful line. For the first time, I felt like I belonged. Darius exhaled, setting his phone down. He had started this journey expecting a battle. What he hadn't expected was how much it would change him, too. Because for the first time in his life, he didn't just feel like a guest fighting for a seat at the table. He felt like he was building the table himself. And he wasn't stopping anytime soon. The battle against discrimination isn't won overnight. It takes persistence, accountability, and the courage to challenge deeply rooted biases. But when real change happens, when systems are rebuilt, policies are restructured, and cultures are reshaped, the impact is undeniable. The Sterling Grand's transformation wasn't just about one hotel. It was a blueprint for an industry that had long ignored its own failings. And it all started with one man who refused to be turned away.